We are in week 8 and we're going to be covering chapter 7, which is liking, love, and other close relationships. Here is your to do list for the week and the chapter objectives. So let's go through some of these. What we're going to be focusing on really is interpersonal attraction as it relates to all close relationships, so friendships as well as romantic relationships. So we're going to be talking about, first and foremost, the human need for affiliation. So what are some of the key characteristics and ways that we express our need to affiliate, to belong, to be with other people? We're going to be looking at characteristics of affect, liking, and how emotions can influence our attraction to others, be it a friendship or interpersonal romantic relationship. And there's different variables that often coincide with who we are attracted to, such as proximity and repeated exposure. So those two things are going to dictate who we're around most and how close we are to them. And those two things really can set the stage for lifelong friendships or romantic relationships. And it really just has to do with who is near you and can influence that attraction. And sometimes that's for the better, and sometimes it's for the worse. But we'll be taking a look at really how and why people evaluate others on the basis of physical attractiveness, and this goes for friendships as well. We tend to have in our minds the what is beautiful is good effect, and we tend to stereotype beauty in a way such that we equate it with being good. But we do have certain key features that we do associate with physical attractiveness. So we'll be taking a look at some of the neuroscience actually on attractiveness and sort of what our brains are wired towards valuing, and this depends on different cultures. But we do, as a culture here, uh, value certain traits and certain characteristics, irrespective of one's sex, that we will deem as attractive. But we'll also be considering the degree to which certain stereotypes about physical attractiveness can play a role in that, and how accurate are they. We'll be looking at the role of similarity. So when we're talking about factors that influence attraction, proximity, repeated exposure, and then similarity also plays a big role. We tend to look for others that we find similarity with, and even this makes sense when you think about the opposites attract statement, in that a lot of times people who are opposites are more opposites in a way that complement one another, rather than be exact opposites that might combat one another. So we'll be looking at how attraction is determined by a portion of similarity as well as traits that coincide or complement one another. We'll be looking at a few other different hypotheses proposed by more contemporary social psychologists, such as repulsion hypothesis, matching hypothesis, and balance theory, all of which help to predict why we choose the mates that we do. We'll be also outlining some of the major characteristics of parent-child and sibling relationships. So here's where we start to get into some of the stuff that is usually covered in child and adolescent development, looking at the various types of attachment styles with parents and how that often sets the stage for later romantic relationships and friendships. So it really is the underpinning for how we consider the nature of close friendships, as well as opposite sex friendships and romantic relationships, all hinge upon the with our parents from a young age. And then we'll start to verge a little bit and look at how romantic relationship differs from close friendships. And we'll dig a little deeper into the types of love. We'll look at Sternberg's triangular model of love, and he proposes various combinations of love and what you get from them. So like passionate love, unrequited love, and companionate love. We'll look at what's the healthiest of those combinations and what those would include. And then the last portion of the chapter will be dedicated to discussing differences and instability in relationships, the role of threats and jealousy and conflict resolution within romantic partners, specifically looking at some of the gender differences there in that research. And that will pretty much wrap up this chapter. Have your lecture slides here and the article reading. So you're reading Article 19, and it has to do with the contrast effect in beauty, which is tied to your week discussion for week 8. And you're going to be looking at what types of media images we are exposed to today that tell us what is attractive. And this can be any type of popular media, social media, television, print ads, billboards, all of that is fair game. But you're going to be taking a look at what specific images of attractiveness are we presented with today, and does that coincide with what the research says that we will find beautiful. So going back to some of the neuroscience that is discussed in your book as to how our brains are wired to look at beauty, does that coincide with our current idea of what is beautiful today? So you definitely need to be looking at the textbook and understanding and reading through that before you dive into this article here. You want to have a good underpinning of what the research says. And then the article dives a little bit more into this contrast effect, which is basically talking about when we're presented with many images of something that is very beautiful, and then we are presented with something that is quite beautiful or say even average, we tend to rate it as even lower because what we're comparing it to is something that we just saw. And so this repeated over time, what we tend to see happen is that we rate others' attractiveness lower than we normally would if we've just seen something that is very high in terms of attractiveness or beauty. And this is where the media can really play a strong role in what we view as beautiful or not, and how much we're exposed to very attractive images might actually make us quite dissatisfied with the partner that we have or the people that we are around, because we're constantly comparing and contrasting with those images. So the second part of the discussion is asking you to find media images of physical attractiveness from the 50s and the 60s, and then talk about the differences, if any, between those images and the images now that we think of as physically attractive. And you want to use what you know from the text chapter, from the reading. You want to talk about the contrast effect. Specifically, does it matter what type of image is displayed? Will we still fall prey to the contrast effect? So even when we're talking about things other than beauty, like, let's say, material objects or career path, does the contrast effect still work? Do we still compare in that manner? And this is actually piggybacking on a little bit of what you guys covered back in chapter 3, which was social perception, as well as chapter 2, which is social cognition, looking at some of the heuristics that we use, the frameworks that we develop for explaining our social world and how those tend to stick. And we use those to guide our judgments and decision making. It would be great if you guys could tie in some of that earlier content into your understanding of the contrast effect and how it operates with beauty here as it relates to the article. So that wraps up the week. You do not have a test this week. You'll be having a test next week. So definitely take time digesting this chapter. Try listening to the audio of the chapter if you haven't yet done that. That can really be helpful just to have another venue for reading it and just digesting all that material a little bit. And do note too that the article reading, Article 19, is different than what was on your syllabus. So you want to make sure that you're going by this and not the article that was listed on the syllabus. So hopefully that's pretty clear. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me as I am available this week and would love to answer any questions that you have. Thanks, everyone.